70 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, 6 months of darkness, a landscape where a single mistake means death. For centuries, professional trappers called promyshlenniki ventured into the Siberian Taiga armed with nothing but hand tools and centuries of accumulated knowledge. Between 1620 and 1680, over 15,000 of these men worked the endless forests, pursuing sable pelts worth more than gold. Their survival depended on a carefully chosen arsenal of tools, each one tested by generations of use in the world's most unforgiving environment. Every ounce of weight had to be justified. Every tool had to serve multiple functions. There was no room for error, no second chances, and no rescue if something went wrong. Tools to trust, skills that last. This is Bushcraft Arsenal. Number 1. The Yakut Knife. Old trappers had a saying, "A good Yakut knife will save you more lives than a rifle." This wasn't hyperbole. It was hard-earned wisdom from men who staked their lives on a blade's edge. The Yakut knife was unlike any other blade on Earth. One side was perfectly flat with a deep groove running down its length, while the other curved outward like a gentle smile. This wasn't artistic flair. It was survival engineering. When you're trying to slice frozen fish that's harder than wood, that groove prevents the blade from sticking like glue to the meat. The curved side guides the knife naturally through the cut, preventing it from diving too deep and ruining a priceless pelt. These knives were forged from recycled steel, often old Russian files, and hammered until they achieved a hardness that could slice through ice like warm butter. The blade measured 4 to 7 inches long, with a handle carved from birch burl that fit the hand like it was custom-made. Because it was. Every trapper carved his own handle, shaping it over long winter nights until it became an extension of his arm. The wood was treated with bear fat, creating a grip that wouldn't slip even with frozen mittens. This single tool could skin a sable without damaging the $2,000 pelt, carve intricate trap triggers, and prepare a meal that might be the difference between strength and starvation. Number 2. The Siberian Forest Axe. If the knife was precision, the axe was power, but power with finesse. The traditional Siberian Forest Axe weighed just over 2 pounds, light enough to swing all day, but heavy enough to bite deep into frozen wood. The secret was in the head design. A pronounced beard extended below the main cutting edge, allowing the trapper to choke up his grip for delicate work. One moment he'd be splitting firewood with full swings, the next he'd be carving a spoon with the precision of a surgeon. The edge was ground to slice through wood fibers cleanly, even when the wood was frozen solid as stone. These axes were built using an ancient technique, a soft iron body with a steel cutting edge forge welded into place. This gave the axe the best of both worlds, a tough body that could absorb shock without breaking, and a hard edge that stayed sharp through months of use. The handle, always hand-carved, followed the natural curve of the wood grain, creating a tool that felt alive in the hands. Trappers said you could tell a man's skill by watching him use his axe. A master could fell an 8-inch tree, limb it clean, and carve the components for a complex trap, all with the same tool. In the Taiga, versatility wasn't convenience, it was survival. Number 3. The Mosin Nagant Rifle. The Mosin Nagant M 1891/30 earned its reputation in the worst conditions on Earth. This bolt-action rifle, chambered in the powerful 7.62 by 54mm R cartridge, became the backbone of Siberian hunting because it simply refused to quit. The rifle measured over 4 feet long and weighed nearly 9 pounds. Not exactly lightweight by modern standards, but trappers weren't looking for light. They were looking for reliable. The Mosin's simple bolt action could be completely disassembled with nothing but the bolt handle itself. Frozen solid? Heat it by the fire and it worked. Clogged with ice? Clear it out and keep shooting. Most trappers modified their rifles, shortening the barrel to make it manageable on skis. This reduced the rifle's reach, but made it infinitely more practical in dense forest. They'd file down the front sight and add a brass bead that caught what little light filtered through the winter gloom. With ammunition costing the equivalent of $3 per round, every shot had to count. Trappers became legendary marksmen out of economic necessity. Miss a ptarmigan at 50 yards, and you'd just wasted a day's wages. But hit it clean, and you had fresh meat that could keep you going for days. Number 4. The hunting skis with Kamus. In a land where snow measured in feet rather than inches, skis weren't recreation. They were the difference between mobility and being trapped. Siberian hunting skis were carved from single pieces of birch or pine, measuring 6 to 7 feet long and wide enough to float a man over the deepest powder. But the real magic was underneath. The ski bases were covered with Kamus, strips of hide from reindeer legs, applied with the hair pointing backward. This created nature's perfect grip system. Glide forward, and the hair lay flat, slick as glass. Try to slide backward, and thousands of tiny hairs dug into the snow like microscopic ice axes. Preparing Kamus was an art form. The hide had to come from exactly the right part of the reindeer leg, where the hair was short and stiff. It was soaked, stretched, and attached with birch bark strips, creating a bond that could last hundreds of miles of travel. Instead of poles, trappers used a single long staff, part walking stick, part probe, part rifle rest. This staff could test ice thickness, measure snow depth, and provide a steady platform for that crucial shot when game appeared. Old-timers could read snow conditions through their feet and staff, knowing instantly whether the surface would hold or give way. Number 5. The Victor number 1.5 Leghold Trap. Steel traps were expensive. A single Victor number 1.5 cost the equivalent of $45 in today's money. But for a professional trapper, they were worth every kopeck. These traps, with their 5.5-inch jaw spread, were perfectly sized for the most valuable fur-bearers, fox, marten, and small lynx. The trap's jaws were offset, positioned slightly apart when closed, to grip without crushing bone. This kept pelts undamaged and animals alive until the trapper arrived. The springs generated enough force to hold a struggling fox, but not so much as to break bones and ruin valuable fur. Setting these traps in 60 below weather was a test of strength and endurance. The springs became incredibly stiff in extreme cold, requiring enormous hand strength to compress. Many trappers carried special setting tools, lever devices that provided mechanical advantage when fingers were too numb to grip properly. Each trap came with an 18-inch chain ending in a 4-pronged grapple hook. This system allowed trapped animals to move around, reducing stress and keeping fur in prime condition while preventing escape. A well-placed trap could catch multiple animals over a season, making it one of the most cost-effective tools in the trapper's arsenal. Number 6. The Toggle Deadfall. When steel traps were too expensive or too heavy, trappers turned to the wilderness itself. The Toggle Deadfall was the pinnacle of primitive engineering, a trigger system so sensitive it could be set off by a mouse, yet strong enough to support logs weighing hundreds of pounds. The system used just 3 pieces of wood, a vertical post, a horizontal lever, and a small toggle stick. But the tolerances were critical. Each notch had to be cut with precision. Get it wrong, and the trap either wouldn't trigger or would collapse on its own. Experienced trappers could read the forest like a book, selecting the perfect deadfall weight for each target. A 20-pound log for marten, a 60-pound log for lynx. The logs were positioned to fall from just the right height, enough force to kill instantly, but not so much as to damage the pelt. The beauty of the toggle system was its mechanical advantage. When the toggle stick collapsed, it released all the stored energy in an instant. Trappers said a properly set toggle deadfall was faster than lightning, and just as deadly. Best of all, it could be built anywhere, using nothing but an axe, a knife, and the materials the forest provided. Number 7. The Heavy Wolf Trap. Some threats required serious firepower, The Victor No. 3 wolf trap, with its massive 6.5-inch jaws and bone-crushing spring tension, was designed for the apex predators that could destroy an entire trapline in a single night. These traps weighed over 3 pounds each and required specialized tools to set. The springs were so powerful that they could break fingers if handled carelessly. But when a pack of wolves was terrorizing your trapline, eating your catch, and destroying your equipment, the investment was worth it. The trap's construction was overbuilt for the harsh conditions: heavy steel jaws, premium springs that functioned at 60 below, and a chain system that could hold a struggling wolf. The entire assembly was designed to be wolf-proof. These intelligent predators quickly learned to avoid poorly designed traps. Setting wolf traps was as much psychology as mechanics. Wolves were smart, cautious, and had noses that could detect human scent from incredible distances. Trappers would boil their traps in pine needle water, bury them in snow for days to eliminate odors, and use every trick they knew to fool these cunning predators. Number 8. The Spring Snare System. Before modern body grip traps existed, trappers created their own instant kill devices using bent saplings and wire snares. These spring snares operated on the same principle as modern conibear traps, but were built entirely from forest materials. The power source was a green birch pole, 2 to 3 inches thick and 6 to 8 feet long, bent into a tight arc and held under tremendous tension. When triggered, this spring would snap a wire noose tight around an animal's neck, killing instantly and humanely. The trigger mechanism was elegantly simple, a notched stick system that would release at the slightest touch. The snare loop had to be sized exactly right: 4 inches for marten, 6 for fox, 8 for lynx. Position it wrong, and you'd catch nothing. Position it right, and you had a trap that worked while you slept. Trappers often maintained 50 to 100 spring snares along their lines. They were light, effective, and could be built from materials found anywhere in the forest. A broken snare could be repaired in minutes, making them incredibly practical for extended wilderness expeditions. Number 9. The Unty boot system. In the Siberian winter, your feet were your lifeline. Lose them to frostbite, and you were dead. The Unty boot system was the ultimate Arctic footwear, designed to keep feet warm and dry in temperatures reaching -60 degrees Fahrenheit that would freeze exposed skin in minutes. These boots were made from reindeer leg hide, specifically the lower legs, where the hair was naturally water-resistant and incredibly tough. The boots extended to the knee, providing protection from deep snow and wind. They were deliberately oversized, allowing thick felt insoles and air circulation. The felt insoles were works of art in themselves, made from processed reindeer hair that had been repeatedly wetted, pressed, and dried until it formed a dense, insulating mat. These insoles were replaced daily. Wet insoles in extreme cold were a guaranteed path to frostbite. The sole featured carved tread patterns and sometimes bone or antler grips for traction on ice. The entire boot system weighed less than 3 pounds per pair, but could keep feet warm down to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Properly maintained Unty boots were the difference between walking out of the wilderness and being carried out. Number 10. The reindeer parka. The traditional parka wasn't just clothing, it was a portable survival shelter. Made from reindeer hide with the fur turned inward, these garments weighed 8 to 12 pounds, but provided insulation that could keep a man alive in temperatures that would kill in minutes. The construction was sophisticated, using a 2-layer system. The inner parka trapped body heat with dense reindeer fur, while the outer parka shed wind and moisture. The loose fit was critical. Tight clothing compressed the insulating air and led to rapid heat loss. The hood was lined with wolverine fur around the face opening. This wasn't luxury. Wolverine fur had a unique property. Unlike other furs, it didn't accumulate ice from breath moisture, keeping the face opening clear even in the worst conditions. Trappers said a good parka was like wearing a warm cabin. The multiple layers of trapped air created a personal microclimate that could sustain life even when the outside world was trying to kill you. These garments could last decades with proper care, often being passed down from father to son like precious heirlooms. Number 11. The Fire Kit. Fire was life in the Siberian wilderness, and the trapper's fire kit was built around the most reliable tinder on Earth, birch bark. This remarkable material would ignite from the smallest spark and burn even when soaking wet, making it the foundation of wilderness firecraft. The kit contained 3 types of birch bark: paper-thin outer bark for catching sparks, fibrous inner bark for sustaining flames, and thick bark sheets for wind protection. The outer bark was processed into sheets so thin they were almost transparent, yet they contained enough natural oils to burst into flame at the touch of a spark. The fire-making tools were simple but effective: a steel striker made from an old file, carefully selected flint, and char cloth prepared by heating fabric in a sealed container. The steel had to be high carbon to produce hot sparks, while the flint was chosen for its ability to generate abundant sparks, even in extreme cold. Char cloth was the secret weapon, fabric that had been heated until it carbonized but didn't burn completely. This material would catch the smallest spark and hold a glowing ember for several minutes, giving the trapper time to build his fire even with numb fingers. The entire kit weighed less than a pound, but could reliably produce fire when matches would fail and lighters would freeze. Number 12. The Copper Cooking Pot. The trapper's cooking pot was his kitchen, his water source, and sometimes his lifeline. Made from copper for its superior heat conduction, these pots could transform precious fuel into hot meals with maximum efficiency. Copper was chosen because it heated evenly and quickly, critical when firewood was limited and cooking time needed to be minimized. The pot typically held 2 to 3 liters and featured a tight-fitting lid that doubled as a frying pan. The bail handle allowed it to hang over fires, while the flat bottom made it stable on uneven surfaces. But the pot's uses went far beyond cooking. It melted snow for drinking water, rendered animal fat for waterproofing, and boiled trap components to remove human scent. In emergencies, it could even serve as a signaling device, reflecting sunlight for miles across the white landscape. The interior was often tinned to prevent copper poisoning from acidic foods. Maintenance was critical. The pot had to be kept scrupulously clean and dry to prevent corrosion. A well-maintained copper pot could last decades, becoming as essential to the trapper as his rifle or his knife. Number 13. The Sinew Sewing Kit. In the wilderness, the ability to repair clothing and equipment could mean the difference between life and death. The trapper's sewing kit was built around sinew thread, processed from the back tendons of large animals and stronger than any manufactured thread. Sinew preparation was an art form. The tendons were dried, split into individual fibers, then twisted together to create thread of varying thicknesses. This thread was waterproof, incredibly strong, and would actually tighten as it dried, creating repairs that were often stronger than the original material. The kit included bone needles carved from dense leg bones, polished smooth and sharpened to fine points. Unlike metal needles, bone needles wouldn't break in extreme cold. The kit also contained a bone awl for punching holes in thick leather and patches of various materials for different types of repairs. Repair techniques were sophisticated and effective. A torn parka could be patched using leather and sinew stitching that was stronger than the original seam. Broken snowshoe frames could be lashed back together with sinew that would hold for hundreds of miles. The entire kit weighed less than half a pound, but could repair almost anything the wilderness could break. Number 14. The Fishing Kit. Fish provided crucial protein and essential fats that were difficult to obtain from small game. The trapper's fishing kit was simple but effective: bone hooks, sinew lines, and stone weights that could land everything from grayling to massive pike. The hooks were carved from leg bones of large animals, shaped and polished until they were smooth and sharp. They ranged from tiny hooks for small fish to large hooks capable of landing salmon. Bone was ideal because it was strong, wouldn't rust, and remained functional even in extreme cold. Fishing lines were made from twisted sinew or horsehair, depending on what was available. Sinew was stronger but more visible, while horsehair was nearly invisible underwater but less durable. The lines were typically 20 to 30 feet long, wound on wooden spools carved during long winter nights. Ice fishing required specialized techniques and tools. Holes had to be cut through ice up to 3 feet thick using steel chisels, then kept open by regular clearing. But a successful fishing spot could provide fresh protein for weeks, making the fishing kit an essential component of the trapper's survival arsenal. Number 15. The snowshoes. While skis were perfect for long-distance travel, snowshoes were essential for hunting and trap setting in dense forest where maneuverability mattered more than speed. Traditional Siberian snowshoes were made from bent birch frames with rawhide webbing measuring 12 to 14 inches wide and 36 to 42 inches long. The frame was carved from a single piece of wood, steamed and bent into an oval shape that provided maximum flotation with minimum weight. The wood had to be selected carefully: straight grain, no knots, and the flexibility to bend without breaking under stress. The webbing was woven from rawhide strips in a hexagonal pattern that distributed weight evenly across the snow surface. The rawhide was attached using sinew lashing, creating a flexible connection that could absorb the shock of walking through uneven terrain. Snowshoes allowed trappers to move silently through the forest, approaching trap sites without alerting game to their presence. They were essential for hunting in deep snow where skis would be too cumbersome. The ability to move quietly and efficiently on snowshoes often meant the difference between a successful hunt and going hungry. These 15 tools formed the complete survival system of the Siberian trapper, each one tested by generations of men who faced the ultimate challenge. In the endless white silence of the taiga, these implements represented the difference between mastering the environment and being mastered by it. They remind us that true survival isn't about having the most gear. It's about having the right gear and the knowledge to use it when everything depends on getting it right. Let me know in the comments which of these Siberian survival tools impressed you most. Was it the asymmetric genius of the Yakut knife or the ingenious Kamus grip system on those hunting skis? See you in the next episode.